The galaxy was a dark place where fear ruled everything. For thousands of years, one species had made sure of that. They were called the Cathara, and they were the perfect killers. The Cathara stood twice as tall as most beings. Their bodies were covered in black armor that grew from their skin like metal scales. 6 arms moved with deadly grace, each ending in claws that could cut through steel. Their faces had no eyes that others could see, but they could sense heat, movement, and even thoughts from miles away. What made them truly terrifying was how they worked together. Every Cathara could feel what the others felt. When one saw prey, they all knew. When one felt pain, they all shared it. This connection made them hunt like a single massive creature with many bodies. The Cathara did not hunt for food alone. They hunted because they loved it. They would arrive at a planet in their dark ships and begin what they called the Great Game. First, they would study the people living there. They learned how they moved, how they thought, how they feared. Then the real hunt would begin. They did not kill everyone at once. That would be too easy and too boring. Instead, they would take people one by one. A farmer working in his field would simply disappear. A mother walking home would never arrive. Children playing outside would vanish without a sound. Each disappearance would spread more fear among those who remained. The Cathara enjoyed watching entire civilizations crumble under this terror. Governments would fall apart as leaders tried to protect people who could not be protected. Families would turn against each other as paranoia grew. Cities would empty as people tried to hide in places where hiding was impossible. After months or sometimes years of this slow torture, the Cathara would finish their game. They would sweep across the planet and kill every last intelligent being they could find. Then they would take what they wanted and move on to the next world, leaving behind only empty cities and bones. No one had ever successfully fought back against the Cathara. Many had tried, of course. Brave warriors had charged at them with the best weapons their worlds could make. Smart scientists had built traps and defensive systems. Entire military fleets had thrown themselves at Cathara ships. Nothing worked. The Cathara were simply too perfect at what they did. They were stronger than any other species. They were faster than seemed possible for creatures so large. Their armor could stop almost any weapon. Their ships were works of art designed for only one purpose: hunting and killing. Most importantly, they could not be surprised. Because they shared thoughts with each other, attacking one meant fighting all of them at once. They could coordinate their movements perfectly, setting traps within traps and always staying one step ahead of their prey. Over time, the surviving species in the galaxy learned to accept this terrible reality. The Cathara were apex predators, and everyone else was prey. Entire civilizations changed their way of life to avoid being noticed. Some species went underground, building hidden cities deep in planets where the Cathara might not look. Others scattered across empty space, never staying in one place long enough to be found. The galaxy's greatest scientists and philosophers had tried to understand why the Cathara existed. Some believed they were nature's way of keeping the galaxy balanced. Others thought they were punishment for some ancient crime. A few dared to suggest that perhaps someday something would evolve that could challenge them. These few were usually laughed at or ignored. What could possibly evolve to beat perfect hunters? What species could develop the strength, speed, and coordination needed to match the Cathara? It seemed impossible. The Cathara themselves had never worried about such questions. They knew they were the best at what they did. They had proven it across thousands of worlds over thousands of years. No species had ever even come close to threatening them. They ruled the galaxy not through politics or economics, but through simple, undeniable superiority in the art of killing. Their ships moved between star systems like sharks through water, always looking for new prey to hunt. They had detailed maps of every inhabited world, every trade route, every place where intelligent life might be hiding. Their scouts ranged far ahead of their main fleets, searching for signs of civilizations that might provide good sport. It was one of these scout ships that first detected the strange signals coming from a small blue planet in an ordinary star system. The signals were weak and primitive, suggesting a species that had not yet learned to travel between stars. Usually, the Cathara preferred more advanced prey. Primitive species were too easy to hunt, and provided little challenge. But something about these signals was different. The patterns were complex in a way that suggested unusual intelligence. The Cathara scouts spent several days analyzing the transmissions and became increasingly intrigued. This species, whatever they were, seemed to have developed technology and social structures that were surprisingly sophisticated for their apparent level of development. The scout reported its findings to the nearest hunting fleet. The fleet commander, a massive Cathara named Vextar, who had led successful hunts on over 50 worlds, decided this might be worth investigating. It had been several months since his fleet had found truly interesting prey. Most recent hunts had been disappointing, species that gave up too quickly or civilizations too scattered to provide proper sport. Vextar ordered his fleet to change course toward the blue planet. As they traveled, his hunters prepared their equipment and shared their excitement through their mental link. The thought of a new type of prey made them eager for the hunt to begin. They had no way of knowing that this hunt would be different from all the others. They could not imagine that somewhere on that small blue planet, creatures called humans were living their lives completely unaware that perfect predators were coming for them. The Cathara had spent so long being the hunters that they had forgotten what it felt like to be anything else. They could not conceive of a species that might see them not as unstoppable killers, but simply as another problem to be solved. As their dark ships moved through space toward Earth, the Cathara made their plans. They would study these humans first, learn their weaknesses and fears. Then they would begin the great game once again, breaking down this new civilization piece by piece until nothing remained but another empty world, and the memory of perfect prey. But the humans had their own plans, though they did not know it yet. Hidden in their nature was something the galaxy had never seen before: the ability to look at apex predators and see not gods of death, but simply another species of animal that could be understood, outsmarted, and if necessary, killed. The stage was set for a hunt unlike any other in the galaxy's long and bloody history. The Cathara ships entered Earth's solar system like silent shadows. They moved past the outer planets without being detected by human instruments. Their technology was far beyond anything humans had ever imagined. To them, human radar and satellites were like children's toys, easy to avoid or disable. Vextar studied the blue planet from his command ship. His hunters had spent weeks analyzing human transmissions, learning their languages and understanding their basic technology. What they found was both interesting and disappointing. Humans were clearly intelligent. They had built cities, developed complex societies, and created machines that could think and calculate. But they were also weak and divided. The planet was split into many different groups that often fought each other. They had weapons, but nothing that could threaten ships like his. Most disappointing of all, humans seemed to have no idea that anything dangerous existed beyond their world. They searched for life among the stars, but they did it slowly and carefully, like prey animals afraid of making noise. They had no real defenses against attack from space. Vextar decided to begin with the traditional approach. He would take a small team down to the planet's surface and start the fear campaign. They would capture some humans, study how they reacted to terror, and learn the best ways to break their spirits. Only when the humans were properly afraid would the real hunt begin. The first team landed in a remote area of what humans called Montana. Dense forests covered the mountainous region, providing good cover for Cathara operations. Their ship, invisible to human detection, settled in a clearing surrounded by tall trees. 6 Cathara hunters emerged from the ship. They moved through the forest like living shadows, their enhanced senses mapping every sound and movement for miles around. They found what they were looking for within hours: an isolated human settlement with only a few dozen people. The settlement was a logging camp where humans cut down trees and processed them into lumber. The humans lived in simple buildings and used basic machines to do their work. They had a few primitive weapons for protection against wild animals, but nothing that concerned the Cathara. Following their usual pattern, the hunters began with single disappearances. A human working alone in the forest simply vanished. His tools were found, but he was gone without any sign of struggle. The next day, a woman walking between buildings disappeared in broad daylight. Her footprints ended suddenly, as if she had been lifted into the air. The Cathara expected the humans to react with growing fear and paranoia. They waited for the settlement to start breaking down as people turned against each other, suspecting neighbors and friends. This was how it always happened with intelligent prey. But something was wrong. Instead of falling apart, the humans began working together more closely. They organized search parties to look for their missing people. They set up watch schedules so no one would be alone. They gathered their weapons and started patrolling their settlement in groups. More strange still, some humans began leaving the safety of their buildings to hunt for whatever was taking their people. They followed tracks, analyzed broken branches, and studied the disappearance sites like detectives solving a crime. Instead of hiding in fear, they were actively trying to find their hunters. Cathara hunter HFY was responsible for the third capture. He had chosen a human male who was checking equipment near the edge of the settlement. It should have been simple: grab the human and disappear before anyone noticed. But as HFY moved in for the capture, the human suddenly spun around and raised a strange device. The device made a loud noise and fired a small metal projectile that struck HFY in the shoulder. The projectile did not penetrate his armor, but the impact was surprising. More surprising was what happened next. Instead of running away in terror, the human reloaded his weapon and fired again. When that shot also failed to damage the Cathara, the human dropped his gun and charged forward with a metal tool, swinging it at HFY's head. HFY was so shocked by this behavior that he almost missed blocking the attack. No prey species had ever directly attacked a Cathara before. The human's weapon could not hurt him, but the human didn't seem to care. He kept fighting until HFY finally subdued him, but the damage was done. The loud noise of the human's weapon had alerted the entire settlement. Instead of cowering in their buildings, dozens of humans came running toward the sound. They carried weapons and moved in organized groups, clearly intending to fight whatever they found. HFY had to retreat quickly, taking his captured human with him. For the first time in his long career as a hunter, he was running away from prey. The other Cathara were equally confused by what they had experienced. The humans showed no proper respect for superior predators. When they found evidence of Cathara presence, they didn't hide or flee. Instead, they studied it and tried to figure out how to fight back. Even more disturbing, the humans began adapting their behavior after each encounter. They improved their patrols, made better weapons, and developed new tactics. It was as if they treated the Cathara not as unstoppable death gods, but as just another problem that could be solved with enough effort. The captured human proved to be the most unsettling discovery of all. Under interrogation, he showed fear, but not the kind of fear the Cathara were used to. He was afraid of dying, but he was not afraid of fighting. When he spoke about his missing friends, his fear turned into something the Cathara had never encountered before: anger. The human told them that more humans would come looking for him. He promised that they would find ways to hurt the Cathara, no matter how strong or advanced they were. He spoke with absolute certainty that humans would never stop fighting, never stop learning, and never stop trying to kill anything that threatened them. This confidence was so alien to the Cathara that they didn't know how to respond to it. Every other species they had hunted eventually accepted their fate. Even the bravest warriors ultimately realized they could not win, and either fled or died with dignity. But this human seemed to believe that defeat was impossible as long as humans kept fighting. The Cathara hunters found themselves in a situation they had never faced before. Their fear campaign was not only failing, it was making the humans more dangerous. Each attack taught the humans something new about their enemies. Each disappearance made the remaining humans more organized and determined. Vextar decided to change tactics. Instead of slow psychological warfare, he would demonstrate Cathara superiority through direct action. His hunters would attack the settlement openly, killing some humans while leaving others alive to spread word of what had happened. But when the Cathara ships descended on the logging camp, they found it empty. The humans had abandoned their buildings and scattered into the forest. Worse, they had left behind surprises. Hidden explosive devices damaged 2 Cathara scouts who entered the buildings. Concealed pits filled with sharpened stakes injured another hunter who pursued fleeing humans. The humans had somehow acquired knowledge of Cathara capabilities and used it to create effective traps. Most shocking of all, the humans had managed to ambush and kill one of the pursuing hunters. They had used teamwork, sacrifice, and improvised weapons to bring down a Cathara warrior. It should have been impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. As Vextar stood over the body of his fallen hunter, he realized that everything the Cathara thought they knew about hunting was about to change. These humans were not prey. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, a species that refused to accept the natural order of predator and prey. The hunt was just beginning, but already the Cathara were learning a terrible truth. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that doesn't know it's supposed to lose. News of the failed hunt spread through Cathara space like poison in water. Vextar's report to the High Command was received with disbelief, then anger, then something the Cathara rarely felt: concern. A prey species had killed a Cathara hunter. Not through luck or accident, but through planning and skill. The humans had studied their enemy, learned its weaknesses, and executed a successful attack. This had never happened in recorded Cathara history. High Commander Thexmore called an emergency gathering of the war fleets. He was ancient even by Cathara standards, having led hunts for over 3 centuries. His armor bore the marks of 1,000 battles, and his presence commanded absolute respect from every warrior in the fleet. "These humans have shown disrespect to our kind," Thexmore announced to the assembled commanders. "They have killed one of our own and shown no proper fear of our superiority. This cannot be allowed to continue." The decision was made to deploy a full war fleet to Earth. Not just a hunting party or a single ship, but dozens of vessels carrying thousands of Cathara warriors. They would teach these humans what happened to species that dared to fight back against their betters. But while the Cathara were planning their response, the humans were busy learning everything they could from their encounters. The body of the dead Cathara hunter had been studied by the best scientists on Earth. Military experts examined its armor, weapons, and biology. Engineers reverse-engineered pieces of captured technology. More importantly, human leaders had finally accepted what their military forces had been trying to tell them. Earth was under attack by hostile aliens, and traditional approaches to warfare would not work. Within months, every major government on Earth was working together in ways they never had before. Resources that had been used for fighting each other were redirected toward preparing for the alien threat. Scientists shared research freely. Military forces combined their knowledge and experience. The humans had one advantage the Cathara had not expected. They learned from failure faster than any species the galaxy had ever seen. Every mistake taught them something new. Every defeat showed them what didn't work, helping them figure out what might work better. When the Cathara war fleet arrived at Earth, they expected to find a primitive planet defended by crude weapons and simple tactics. Instead, they found a world that had transformed itself into a fortress in less than a year. Human orbital platforms armed with jury-rigged alien weapons waited in defensive positions. The planet's surface bristled with anti-aircraft systems built from a combination of human engineering and captured Cathara technology. Most disturbing of all, human ships had somehow been launched into space to meet the alien fleet. The human ships were ugly compared to the elegant Cathara vessels. They had been built quickly using whatever materials were available. They looked more like flying scrapyards than proper warships. But they were armed with weapons that could hurt Cathara ships, and they were crewed by humans who had no intention of backing down. Thexmore studied the human defenses with growing unease. This was not how prey species were supposed to behave. They should be cowering on their planet's surface, begging for mercy or trying to flee to other star systems. Instead, they had prepared for war. The first engagement began when a squadron of Cathara fighters moved to test human defenses. They expected to sweep aside the crude human ships easily, clearing the way for the main attack. Instead, they found themselves facing opponents who fought like nothing they had ever encountered. Human pilots seemed to have no sense of self-preservation. They rammed their ships into Cathara vessels, sacrificing themselves to destroy enemies. They used their ships as weapons, turning them into guided missiles that could not be stopped by conventional defenses. Even more disturbing, the humans coordinated their attacks in ways that maximized damage to Cathara forces. They seemed to understand that their individual ships were weaker than Cathara fighters, so they worked together to overwhelm single targets with multiple attackers. When Cathara fighters tried to use their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid human attacks, they found that the humans had prepared for this too. Human ships carried weapons that could track fast-moving targets and explosives that could damage multiple enemies at once. The battle that should have been a quick demonstration of Cathara superiority turned into a grinding, fight where human forces gave ground slowly and at great cost to their attackers. Every human ship destroyed took at least one Cathara fighter with it, and often more. Thexmore ordered the main fleet to join the battle. Surely the massive Cathara battleships would overwhelm the human defenses quickly, but as his ships moved into attack position, they encountered something unexpected. The humans had been mining space around their planet. Hidden explosive devices detonated among the Cathara fleet, damaging ships and disrupting their formation. The mines were primitive compared to Cathara technology, but they had been placed with careful planning and triggered at precisely the right moments to cause maximum chaos. As the Cathara fleet tried to reorganize, human ground-based weapons opened fire. Massive railguns launched projectiles at incredible speeds, while missile batteries sent waves of guided warheads toward the alien ships. The weapons were crude but effective, and there were so many of them that even Cathara defensive systems were overwhelmed, but the real shock came when Thexmore's own flagship came under direct attack from a group of human ships that had somehow flanked his position. The human vessels were tiny compared to his massive battleship, but they attacked with a ferocity that defied all logic. One human ship actually managed to crash through his ship's shields and impact the hull directly. The explosion tore a hole in the flagship's armor and disabled several weapon systems. As damage reports poured in, Thexmore realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans were winning. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through sheer determination and tactical innovation. They had turned their weaknesses into strengths and found ways to exploit Cathara advantages against them. The human attack groups worked like packs of predators, surrounding larger Cathara ships and attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. They sacrificed smaller vessels to create openings for larger attacks. They used their own damaged ships as shields to protect vessels that could still fight. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to learn and adapt even in the middle of battle. When Cathara forces changed their tactics, human commanders responded with new strategies within minutes. It was as if they were playing a game where the rules changed constantly, and they were better at changing with them. As the battle raged around Earth, Thexmore found himself facing a reality that no Cathara commander had ever had to accept. His fleet was being destroyed by prey, not just defeated, but systematically dismantled by opponents who refused to acknowledge Cathara superiority. The humans fought with a combination of careful planning and savage improvisation that made them impossible to predict. They used weapons in ways their designers never intended. They turned defensive systems into offensive tools. They made every mistake count as a learning experience that made them more dangerous. When Thexmore finally ordered a retreat, less than half his fleet remained functional. The survivors limped away from Earth carrying news that would shake the Cathara Empire to its foundations. The apex predators had been beaten by their prey. As the damaged Cathara ships fled toward their home territories, human salvage crews were already at work among the wreckage. They collected alien technology, studied enemy tactics, and prepared for the next round of fighting. Because the humans had learned something the Cathara had not yet understood. This was not just a battle for Earth's survival. It was the beginning of a war that would decide which species deserved to be called the galaxy's apex predators, and the humans had no intention of losing that war. The defeated Earth sent shockwaves through every Cathara stronghold in the galaxy. For the first time in their species' history, a full war fleet had been destroyed by prey. The impossible had happened, and now every Cathara leader demanded answers. Supreme War Leader Kexthalan emerged from the deep meditation chambers where the highest commanders communed with the ancient spirits of their race. Standing before the Great Assembly, his 6 arms spread wide in a gesture of absolute authority, he spoke words that would change the galaxy forever. The humans have committed the ultimate crime against the natural order. His voice echoed through the vast chamber. They have shown that prey can kill predators. If this knowledge spreads to other species, our dominion over the galaxy will end. Therefore, there can be only one response: the Great Hunt. The Great Hunt was a concept spoken of in Cathara legends but never used. It meant the mobilization of every ship, every warrior, and every resource their empire possessed. It meant the complete and total extermination of a species, not for sport or sustenance, but for survival. Every Cathara fleet across the galaxy received the same orders: abandon all current hunts and converge on human space. No matter where they were or what they were doing, all forces would unite to wipe out the species that dared to challenge their supremacy. But while the Cathara gathered their strength, the humans were not idle. The victory over Thexmoor's fleet had given them access to intact Cathara technology, and more importantly, proof that their enemies could be beaten. Human engineers worked around the clock to understand alien systems. They discovered that Cathara technology, while advanced, followed principles that human science could comprehend and improve upon. Within months, hybrid human-alien ships were rolling out of hastily constructed shipyards. More significantly, the humans had made contact with other species in the galaxy. Hidden civilizations that had survived by avoiding Cathara attention began receiving secret messages from Earth. The content was simple but revolutionary. The apex predators could be killed. Species that had hidden in asteroid fields for generations sent representatives to meet with human leaders. Civilizations that had scattered across empty space offered their ancient knowledge in exchange for human protection. Even the most timid races began to hope that perhaps their long nightmare might finally end. The Zephyrians were among the first to ally with humanity. Their ancestors had been master shipbuilders before the Cathara forced them into hiding. They brought knowledge of faster-than-light, travel and energy weapons that human engineers quickly adapted. For their own ships, the crystalline Vextai contributed their expertise in computing and communications. Their quantum processing networks allowed human forces to coordinate across vast distances, matching the psychic link that gave Cathara their tactical advantage. The insectoid Threx colonies provided something equally valuable: detailed maps of Cathara territory and intelligence about their military capabilities. After centuries of careful observation from hiding, they knew more about Cathara weaknesses than the aliens knew themselves. As these alliances formed, human military doctrine evolved rapidly. They learned that direct confrontation played to Cathara's strengths. Instead, they developed tactics based on mobility, deception, and the systematic exploitation of enemy weaknesses. Human fleets began operating in small, fast groups that could strike at Cathara positions and disappear before reinforcements arrived. They used captured alien technology to mask their presence, allowing them to ambush enemy ships that thought they were hunting empty space. Most importantly, the humans had learned to think like predators rather than prey. They studied Cathara behavior patterns, identified their hunting preferences, and turned those preferences into traps. When the first waves of Cathara reinforcements arrived at what they expected to be human space, they found something unexpected: emptiness. Earth and its colonies appeared to have been abandoned. Human ships were gone, and their planets showed no signs of recent activity. This should have been a victory, but it felt wrong to the Cathara commanders. Prey did not simply vanish. They either fled to new territory or hid in place. The complete absence of human presence suggested something else entirely. The truth became clear when Cathara scout ships began disappearing. Single vessels on patrol would simply vanish without sending distress signals. Small squadrons investigating anomalous readings would fail to report back. The hunters were being picked off one by an enemy they could not see. Human forces had scattered throughout the galaxy, using their new alliance networks to establish hidden bases in systems the Cathara had never bothered to explore. From these secret positions, they launched calculated strikes against isolated enemy units. The attacks followed a pattern that maximized psychological impact. Human forces would strike suddenly, destroy their targets completely, and vanish before Cathara reinforcements could respond. No Cathara ship was allowed to escape and report what had happened. This strategy had two effects. First, it slowly reduced Cathara numbers without allowing them to learn from their losses. Second, it created an atmosphere of paranoia among Cathara forces who knew their comrades were disappearing but had no idea how or why. The Cathara tried to counter this by traveling in larger groups and maintaining constant communication with their bases. But the humans adapted to this as well, using more powerful weapons and coordinated attacks to overwhelm even well-defended targets. When a Cathara battle group would enter what appeared to be empty space, they might suddenly find themselves surrounded by human ships that had been hiding behind asteroids or cloaked by alien technology. The humans would attack from all directions simultaneously, focusing their fire on command vessels and communication arrays to prevent the enemy from coordinating a response. The battles were brutal, and short. Human forces had learned that extended engagements favored the Cathara, whose superior individual ship capabilities would eventually tell. Instead, they struck hard and fast, inflicting maximum damage before retreating to fight another day. As months passed, the great hunt began to falter. Cathara fleets found themselves chasing shadows while their numbers steadily decreased. Supply lines came under attack from enemies who seemed to know exactly when and where shipments would be most vulnerable. Even worse, reports began filtering back to Cathara Command that other species were beginning to resist their rule. Worlds that had been cowed into submission for centuries were suddenly rebelling, inspired by news of human victories. The galaxy's hidden civilizations were emerging from their hiding places, and many of them were armed with human-supplied weapons. Supreme War leader Cathara found himself facing a strategic nightmare. The Great Hunt had been intended to crush human resistance quickly and decisively. Instead, it had evolved into a galaxy-wide war of attrition that his forces were losing. The humans had done something no prey species had ever accomplished. They had turned the Cathara's own advantages against them. The aliens' confidence in their superiority had made them predictable. Their reliance on terror tactics had failed against an enemy that fought back instead of fleeing. Their assumption that all other species would remain passive had been shattered by a growing rebellion. As Cathara losses mounted, and their territory began shrinking under constant attack, Cathara was forced to confront a truth that challenged everything his species believed about themselves. The apex predators were losing their grip on the galaxy, and the species that was taking it from them had learned to hunt them with a skill and determination that exceeded their own. The Great Hunt had become a fight for survival, and for the first time in their history, the Cathara were not certain they would win. The siege of Cathara Prime began not with massive fleets and thunderous weapons, but with silence. For 3 years, human forces and their allies had systematically eliminated every Cathara outpost, destroyed every supply depot, and cut every communication line leading to the aliens' homeworld. The once mighty Cathara Empire had been reduced to a single heavily fortified planet, surrounded by the wreckage of their former glory. Supreme War leader Cathara stood in his command chamber, watching the tactical displays show nothing but empty space where his fleets should have been. The humans had proven to be everything the Cathara were not. Where the aliens relied on individual superiority and instinctive coordination, humans used adaptability and innovation. Where Cathara fought for dominance and sport, humans fought to win by any means necessary. Where the aliens believed in their natural right to rule, humans simply got the job done. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the final assault from the bridge of the hybrid warship Defiance. The vessel was a perfect example of human military philosophy. Ugly, efficient, and deadly. Built from salvaged Cathara technology and human engineering, it represented 3 years of continuous improvement and adaptation. Around her ship, the combined fleet of the Galactic Liberation Alliance spread across space like a vast net. Human vessels flew alongside Zephyrian cruisers, Vex-Tide data ships, and Threx swarm fighters. Every species that had ever hidden from the Cathara was now united under human leadership. All units report ready, her communications officer announced. The planetary shields are charged to maximum, but our analysis shows they cannot withstand a coordinated bombardment. Chen nodded, but she was not looking at the planet's defenses. She was studying the psychological profile her analysts had developed of Cathara leadership. After years of fighting them, humans had learned to predict their behavior as easily as hunting any other dangerous animal. They will not surrender, she said to her staff. Surrender is not in their nature. They will fight to the last individual because they cannot imagine a universe where they are not the apex predators. This understanding had shaped human strategy from the beginning. There could be no negotiation with the Cathara, no peaceful coexistence, no mercy for a species that had spent millennia treating all other life as prey. The humans had learned to think like their enemies, and they had concluded that only complete extinction would end the threat. The attack began with waves of automated drones that overwhelmed Cathara defensive systems through sheer numbers. Each drone was expendable, designed to absorb enemy fire while gathering data about defensive positions. The Cathara shot them down by the thousands, but each destruction provided information that made the next wave more effective. As the planet's outer defenses weakened, larger ships moved into position. Human vessels used tactics that had been refined through hundreds of battles, coordinating their attacks with mathematical precision. They had learned to fight as a single organism, just as the Cathara did, but with better planning and superior numbers. The Cathara fought back with all the skill and ferocity that had made them the galaxy's apex predators. Their weapons tore through human ships, and their warriors demonstrated the same deadly competence that had terrorized civilizations for millennia. But they were fighting the last battle of a war they had already lost. Human forces had evolved beyond their original limitations. They had absorbed the best technology from dozens of allied species, learned tactics from every engagement, and developed weapons specifically designed to kill Cathara. Most importantly, they had learned to accept losses as the price of victory rather than as defeats to be avoided. When Cathara defenders destroyed a human ship, 2 more took its place. When alien warriors demonstrated their superior individual combat skills, human forces responded with coordinated attacks that turned strength into weakness. Every Cathara advantage had been studied, understood, and countered. The battle for Cathara Prime lasted 17 hours. By the end, the planet's surface was scarred by weapons fire. Its cities were burning and its shields had finally collapsed under the relentless assault. Kextalan made his final stand in the ancient fortress that had housed Cathara leadership for 1,000 generations. The supreme war leader fought with all the skill and fury of his race, his 6 arms wielding weapons that could cut through steel and his armor deflecting most attacks. But he was facing human soldiers who had been training for this moment for years, equipped with weapons designed specifically to kill his kind. When the last Cathara warrior fell, the galaxy's oldest and most successful predator species ceased to exist. 3 years after declaring the Great Hunt, the hunters had become extinct, killed by prey that had learned to hunt them with greater skill than they had ever possessed. Admiral Chen stood in the ruins of the Cathara Command Center, looking down at Kexthalan's body. There was no satisfaction in the moment, only the grim completion of a necessary task. The galaxy was finally free from the apex predators that had terrorized it for millennia. But as reports came in from across former Cathara territory, Chen realized that the war's end was creating new problems. Species that had hidden for generations were emerging to find a galaxy where the old rules no longer applied. Some were grateful for their liberation. Others were terrified of their liberators. The humans had proven they could hunt the galaxy's most perfect predators to extinction. They had demonstrated tactical abilities, technological adaptation, and ruthless efficiency that exceeded anything the Cathara had ever shown. In defeating the apex predators, they had become something potentially more dangerous. Unlike the Cathara, who hunted for biological drives and instinctive pleasure, humans hunted because they chose to. They could be reasoned with, negotiated with, and worked with as allies, but they could also decide that any species posed a threat that needed to be eliminated. The Galactic Liberation Alliance faced the challenge of governing a galaxy that had never known peace. Dozens of species were emerging from hiding, ancient conflicts were resuming, and everyone was looking to humanity for leadership they were not sure they wanted to provide. Dr. James Morrison, Earth's chief xenobiologist, stood before the Alliance Council 6 months after the final battle. His report on the post-war galaxy was both hopeful and sobering. "We have succeeded beyond our wildest expectations," he told the assembled representatives. "The Cathara are extinct, their hunting grounds are being reclaimed by the species they oppressed, and for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy is free from apex predators." He paused, looking around the chamber at the dozens of different species that now looked to humanity for guidance. "But we must remember what we learned about the nature of predation during this war. Apex predators exist not because they are born superior, but because they are more efficient at killing than their prey. We have proven ourselves more efficient at killing than the Cathara ever were." The implications hung in the air like a challenge. Humanity had liberated the galaxy by demonstrating that they were better hunters than the hunters. They had saved everyone by proving they were the most dangerous species in known space. As the council session ended and representatives returned to their worlds, each carried the same quiet knowledge. The galaxy was free from the Cathara, but it was not free from apex predators. It had simply traded old masters for new ones who happened to be more reasonable. For now, the humans seemed content to be protectors rather than conquerors. But they had learned to hunt apex predators to extinction, and that knowledge would never be forgotten. The galaxy had been liberated, but everyone understood that their liberation existed only as long as humanity chose to allow it. The apex predators were dead. Long live the apex predators. In the end, the galaxy had learned a simple truth. In the vast darkness between stars, the most dangerous predator is always the one that learns fastest from its mistakes. And humanity had proven to be very good students indeed.